What we are going to have next is going to be interesting. So it's going to be a hopefully fiery fireside chat between two speakers from two titans of Silicon Valley. The host of the fireside chat is from this networking titan, Juniper Network, Surbhi Kaul. And the guest speaker, Surbhi's guest, in that fireside chat is a speaker from another titan of cloud computing, VMware, Sumit Dhawan, president of VMware. So let me do a quick introduction for Surbhi, even though I don't think Surbhi needs an introduction. And then Surbhi will introduce her guest speaker, Sumit, when she comes up on the stage. Surbhi Kaul is the vice president of global customer experience at Juniper Networks, where she's leading Juniper's customer success and go-to-market initiatives and incorporating customer centricity into Juniper's products and solutions and into every aspect of customer's journey. Prior to Juniper, Surbhi spent more than 20 years running product, design, development, and strategy teams in Fortune 500 companies like Google, YouTube, Netflix, and Cisco. Over the last decades, she has launched multiple successful and insightful products encompassing AI and machine learning. Surbhi is an IIT Kanpur alumna. She did her MS in computer science from Texas A&M University, and most recently, exec management GMP degree from Harvard Business School. She's passionate about giving back to the IIT community, which she's doing today, and engaged in promoting women in engineering and leadership. That's awesome. Surbhi, would you come up here? And Sumit, please take your seat. You guys have mic? Okay.
Yes, we're mic'd up. Thank you very much.
Okay. Let's see what they have to say. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. Before I introduce Sumit, I just wanted to say it is such a pleasure to be back in person. So thank you all for coming here with or without masks. So brave people, please give a round of applause to yourselves for being here. Okay, so before we get started, I'll give a short intro. Again, Sumit, you don't need an intro, but I think it'll be good for everybody to know of all your multiple achievements. So you are currently the president of VMware, and you're leading the company's go-to-market functions, including worldwide sales, strategic corporate alliances, customer experience and success, global industries, marketing, and communications. And previously, you served as VMware's Chief Customer Experience Officer, managing global teams responsible for professional services, technical support, and customer success. Prior to that, you were CEO of Instart, a startup delivering innovations in web applications and security services. You are a seasoned executive with 25 years of experience, proven track record of building and running market-leading businesses. And you hold an MBA from Warrington College of Business at the University of Florida. You have a master's in computer science from University of Minnesota and a BS in computer science from IIT. So another IIT alum, so welcome to the stage and so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here. Obviously met some old rookie graduates who were there with me at the campus, so always brings amazing and fond memories. Great to be here.
Thank you. So we will get started now. We'll spend about 20 minutes having a conversation, and then we'll open up for questions for the audience for about 10 minutes. So let's get started. The topic of today's discussion is multi-cloud era. And as some of us, I'll date myself, we started our journeys when the world used to be a lot of infrastructure on-prem. Everything used to be on-prem for companies. From there, we saw the advent of cloud, and then into the hybrid space where companies had some legacy infrastructure plus some cloud computing and some newer workloads in cloud. And now we are seeing a very different era of multi-cloud. So what I want, Sumit, you to share with us, our attendees here, is what are the challenges that customers are facing today that are making them go towards this multi-cloud era? And what are you or VMware or infrastructure companies doing to address those concerns and those challenges?
Yeah, in my job, I get the pleasure of speaking with several CIOs, and to be completely transparent, VMware most of our customers tend to be what you would call incumbents in their industries, not so many disruptors that, oftentimes you see, for example, the ones across the hall. But the incumbents these days are investing very heavily on the technology end because disruption is all happening from the technology, from here in the Bay Area and everything that gets built from all the innovation that we are familiar with. And in this, as the incumbents are really investing into the technology, what's happening is they started with this mantra of cloud first, where this is, you can think of banking, retail, logistics, government, telecommunications. These are massive, trillions of dollars of industry. Now they are putting trillions of dollars of money into digitization of their business processes and the overall flows. And they said cloud first was the mantra. They started with it, and they quickly realized that doing so was important to sort of create a more top-to-down, stovepiped engine to build these cloud applications. There was no other way to do it because the DNA to do was not there in the traditional machinery. And what's happening now is that as these applications get built, and now they're starting to scale the models and build more and more applications, that they're starting to converge just various functions and get the responsibility of managing different services that are coming across different clouds in more unified fashion. Okay? That's the big fundamental change we see in more and more larger incumbents businesses from the technology end. Started out, hey, listen, there's a team, go run the infrastructure so that it can keep running, and building a new sort of a team of engineers that they hired oftentimes from Google's, YouTube's, oftentimes from this part of the world. Sure. And now they're starting to feel that doing this model, as I talk to more CIOs, CTOs, they say that doing this model is not a sustainable model because at the end of the day, when they're building these applications and services, oftentimes data has to come from multitude of locations, so convergence of these things have to happen. And as a result, more and more of cross-cloud or multi-cloud, whatever you want to call it, trend emerges, which is how they're going to operationalize this, where they can still build at speed that they need so that they don't get disrupted, as that's the threat they have. But doing so in a much more scalable, secure, because their stakeholders, which are usually three parties, the businesses, oftentimes with developers, security, or they have to cater for that for all the compliance, even more so now, and to some extent financial. And the world of multi-cloud, from our perspective at VMware, is to enable customers to do so. So it's a little different. VMware, one of the successes we've had as a company is virtual machines are part of the name of the company, but now VMware's portfolio has evolved significantly, where we have embraced other technologies and standards such as Kubernetes to provide holistic set of solutions for our customers to embrace these cloud as fast as possible, but do so in a cross-cloud fashion. And that's a big trend that we see in the infrastructure space. And I know Juniper is investing in the whole multi-cloud space as well.
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges that you pointed out, that companies want to be nimble while having these multiple clouds and multiple places where they have workloads. And for networking, the challenge is even more intense because you do need some sort of planning up front. You need the capacity planning, the backbones all set up, because workloads can be moved around, but some sort of backbone has to be there in place to move the data across. And so as hardware is getting commoditized, you all started the virtualization, and we are feeling that pain in the networking industry too. So the shift has started or it has been happening, where the intelligence on these boxes, devices, is being moved up-leveled into software. But despite that, there is a lot of need for this upfront planning, which in multi-cloud era is much more challenging than used to be in legacy. And if I can share a little more about the challenges of companies like Juniper that became successful in on-prem, they were in a scenario where they had multitude of operators that knew how to run the infrastructure, had the bits and bytes figured out. Whereas today, as we are pivoting to enterprise customers, what we are seeing is that they don't have the wherewithal needed or necessary to run this kind of, like you're saying, multi-cloud. You have to hire a new type of engineer from the likes of Amazon, AWS, and GCP, or Microsoft. And we see that challenge in our new enterprise customers, that they don't have this wherewithal. They expect the easy button. They want infrastructure companies to solve it for us, don't make us think. And on top of that, collaborate. Make sure that the VMware, the Junipers, the Ciscos, all of the infrastructure companies are building the ecosystem, so everything is solved for me. I don't have to do this piecemeal thinking. That's what enterprise companies are looking for, and we are trying to figure out how to give it to them, how to give those solutions.
Yeah, I think this trend of in the infrastructure space, it has happened in different tiers. If you think about it, it happened server, storage, where all of a sudden these specialized stacks were building out, and it's happening in the world of cloud. So it's natural for the larger enterprises to have solutions that, to some extent, not necessarily runtime, but to some extent for operationalizing it and keeping both the speed but at the same time appropriate compliance, some kind of standardization occurs. And there will be tons of solutions, I believe, in the industry that will come along. We are focused on that because we believe in it as a company, and we see more and more of technologies coming through it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to pivot our conversation a little bit to an area that's really, really special to me, and I think it came up in the previous lightning chat as well, is customer experience. And you have been the Chief Customer Experience Officer at VMware, and that's the role, like leading CX at Juniper is what I'm doing. I want to understand, do you see this shift as something very new in the industry, especially in B2B space? So B2C is always very customer-centric, making very easy to use products, but we are seeing a lot of that customer-centric behavior come up in B2B companies as well. As we build solutions and products for customers in enterprise market, what is that shift? Why is it happening now? What do you suggest people, companies that are newer and that have not made that shift, how do you suggest that they start moving in that direction? And in fact, I would love to take a poll at this point of people here of how many people are in traditional companies that are not necessarily thinking about CX versus people who are in startups and entrepreneurs themselves who understand CX versus not. So how many are in traditional non-CX focused areas or companies, legacy companies? So a few of us, and then a lot of startups. How many of you are not thinking about CX yet? You're like, let me get my product, my MVP out, and then CX will be something I think about in the future. So to both sets of groups of people here, what kind of guidance and advice and CX?
Yeah, I'll start with a story. So I'll tell you about 2.5 years or so ago, when we exited our previous company, I went to Pat Gelsinger at the time, the CEO of VMware, and I sort of went in there more to get some advice on next step in the career journey, and little did I know that it ended up becoming a more of an interview with him or recruiting effort from him successfully, I guess. But through the conversation, we were just having a conversation about VMware, and we were talking about just the whole shift to the subscription economics of the business model, because just it doesn't make much sense at this point in time if you look at the economic model of the larger software companies like ourselves or many others. Just the software we pursued at the time, everything that was happening in hardware as just the entire business model and economic model when the industry started shipping software in the B2B world. It doesn't make any sense because software is not something that stays fixed like hardware does to some extent. And so as a result, the only economic model that makes sense which is subscription oriented. But the problem is the economics and the unit economics in particular of traditional sort of software that you are shipping to someone is pretty simple. It's, you read to all the economics books that you're aware of. Here's the margin, how many units or widgets you sell, and as a result, you pretty much have your P&L as long as you have your OpEx. The problem with subscription is that the model really, really works if you have high retention rates and very, very low cost of retention. So by definition, as a result, there is this aspect of customer retention that becomes extremely important. Okay, so in my conversation with Pat, I was talking about it. Listen, the biggest issue I said that VMware has as you shift towards a different business model is that you're going to have to fundamentally change the economic model of how you're going to retain the dollars that are coming in through subscription. And that can't happen without an investment into customer experience. And you have to do it at a very low cost because otherwise the economics don't work, right? That's sort of what the unit cost economics are. So he said, well, why don't you come in to be the chief customer experience officer? I said, listen, Pat, I've never run support. I've never run professional services. I've never run customer success. You really want me to be the chief customer experience officer?
Such honesty, Sumit.
And but I think that's the source of it, right? There is a fundamental shift of risk. And as a result, rewards that has come in from just the world of subscription economics to the vendor, not from the consumer. Okay, we no longer just can ship you a widget and as a customer and walk away and then service you in case you have issues and ask you for service in case you have more issues. That's the traditional product selling model. So if you're an entrepreneur, if you're building businesses, I would recommend thinking about customer experience starting day one because it's the foundation of your unit economics. And by doing so, what you're doing is you're really thinking about what is your investment level. So that once you've acquired the customer, not just thinking about the product experience so that they can get a great day one experience, but the holistic experience that you're going to invest in through both technology and people, and at what cost and how that's going to erode your cost of retention and total retention rate. At the end of the day, it's a business problem. View it through that, and it's much easier all of a sudden for you to think of it. It's pretty basic unit economics.
Yeah,
so that's sort of my experience with it, and that's a fundamental change that many of companies that are used to shipping widgets or software as a widget that have to go through.
Yeah, and then I think I'm seeing the same in hardware as well, where it used to be exactly like you said, you make the sale and you've shipped the device until the customer calls you for support. There is no hand-holding going on. And again, I'll bring the difference in the service provider versus enterprise customers where they have the army of people, they know how to stand up the product, how to get the maximum benefit out of it, whereas today we have to think of how we handhold the customers so that they achieve that value proposition that we sold when we made that sale.
Exactly. Well, your background is interesting, Surbhi. You spent time at Google, so there is a little bit of B2B, but also B2C.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there was interesting different value or different perspectives for the whole CX.
Absolutely. This customer acquisition cost that we talk about, that B2C companies think about, for them churn is actual revenue that, we do not, at least in B2B market, I was not seeing as much being tracked as a revenue metric. In consumer space, that's extremely important that we are investing time to acquire a customer. And from that point of acquisition, the product has to be so simple to use and onboard that you should not experience that churn. And that will only happen if the product owners, the developers, everybody is thinking of customer, consumer as they're building the product. It cannot be a later on, afterthought that I have built the product, I've shipped it, now let's figure out how to do customer success. So that mindset in consumer space, I see it very, very much enrooted. That is the core fundamental of your product building. But in enterprise B2B companies, we always rely on the salesperson. They'll be able to do the value proposition. The SE, systems engineer that will be able to go do the hand-holding. Maybe a resident engineer, all the slew of people. But one thing that I'm learning at Juniper is exactly this. How do you help the customer succeed post that sale, customer success, and how do you do it in a scalable fashion? So if you want to talk a little bit about that, is how do you do it in a way that you can, the economics you were talking about, that you're not investing so much that you cannot, really ramp up your revenues because you're...
Yeah, I mean, I think I can talk a little bit about it. We did it through more financial disciplined way of investing and then clarity of roles and setting up appropriate metrics. Mechanism. We decided, listen, it's a cost of retention, so whatever recurring revenue you're coming in, we have a sizable recurring revenue. It is public, so it's a little shy of $4 billion. And at that scale, you have a certain percentage of it that we invest in just overall CX holistically. And there is model we transformed over the course of last 3 years or so, where we changed the metrics that we look at, inclusive of some of the churn or usage and even early warning metrics, as well as appropriate incentive structure and cost structures applied to holding the gross retention of the recurring revenue coming in, and then letting sales obviously add to it. So it has been a good, interesting transformation journey for us, but we believe that doing so in this discipline has helped us significantly in just making sure that our unit economics are right, and that starts benefiting in the value of the company.
Absolutely, absolutely. You said a word, a transformation that I want to. Are you saying I have 0 minutes or now time to turn over to? Yes. Let me ask one question and then I'll turn it over to the audience for a few questions, which is about transformation. So you mentioned that, transformation. I want to understand, as you have pivoted the company, VMware has gone through several transformations, as we see in the multi-cloud era that we are entering. What are the biggest challenges that you have seen, that face in any transformation, any leader that's leading a company through transformation? It's whether it's people or processes or technology. Where do you invest your focus and energies during transformations?
Yeah, I think in our assessment, the transformation always starts with, we sort of call them our narratives or a strategy document. I think getting the narrative right is extremely important, and then we were discussing just repeating it over and over again. It takes a lot more in a larger company to get that settled into the organization. We spent a fair bit of time doing so. It just is a big chore. It seems like a big chore when you're spending all this time writing up a document and then having the next layer in the organization write up their strategy that connects to yours and how you're going to transform the company. It certainly helped us a great deal. It got the leadership team aligned and then gradually sort of percolated through into the company. Second thing we focused on, which I believe we have to do, in my opinion, at any scale, I've seen with transformation there are two issues that end up becoming pretty difficult. First is what I would call decision-making, structure, and rights. I think the fundamental issue that I see is the leadership not being clear what decisions they are going to be involved with, and they're not letting go. Because it's harder during change to just get all the decisions let go and delegate it. It's nearly impossible. It's ineffective, in my opinion, because the whole narrative and the decision-making abilities have not percolated through the organization. So you have to hold certain decisions, but you have to be clear which ones you're going to hold and which ones you're authorizing the work streams and the teams that are assigned for different aspects of transformation to go do. It helps you as a leader, and it helps the organization to just move fast. Otherwise, you're stuck. And secondly, unintended consequences, as I call it. The problem is that transformations always have run into issues because you can't imagine every possible scenario. And every other day you're going to run into something that you haven't planned for, you didn't think of, or just was an unintended consequence, positive or negative. What are you going to do with it, and how are you going to deal with it? I think it's a very simple thing, and I think if you go back to some of the public service entities that provide drills about dealing with uncertainty, you can take some kind of simple, disciplined approaches to define what you would do when that happens up front. So you can create at least something certain to deal with something that may happen, in an uncertain way. So I do think there is a certain path that's needed to deal with uncertainty, and that's what we did. We actually had some advisors help us with that, and I have to say that whole structure has helped us go faster and have less frustration. There will always be frustration through change, but less of it.
I love it, love it. Very, very structured approach. I'm going to give like few minutes for a couple of questions, or we're... I'm done. If the audience wants to ask a question, that'll be...
We can just take one question.
I will
I'm not going to disappoint Tushar today.
Oh, Tushar gets the question, not...
I paid for it. Seriously, I mean, you have to do that. Sumit, I always try to settle my scores with you in these kind of situations, old rivalries. So I have a very specific question for you. Multi-cloud, VMware has done some really good work with AWS and Microsoft. Just wanted you to elaborate upon that, the VMC on AWS and VMC on Microsoft. How has it come along? How was it conceived? and its customer success as well as the growth of revenue around that particular concept, which is truly a multi-cloud thing. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, I think what Tushar is referring to is what VMware has done with public cloud. As I mentioned, typically you think of VMware, you obviously are aware of our software in the data centers. The data center business of ours continues to do quite well, even though we hear everyone is going to cloud. There's a huge continued growth in the data centers. But in addition, what we did was we invested in two main areas for public cloud. One was taking all of our full software stack, because it is a lot of work for someone who doesn't have sophistication and scale to run a data center in a pure cloud fashion, which has everything available to developers as APIs and operate everything in a scalable fashion. And what we did was we took that software and worked with AWS, Microsoft, as well as Google, and brought it as a service, a full subscription, full stack, on top of their hardware. Okay, so it was a deep engineering collaboration to do so. And as a result, it became very easy for customers to adopt everything as a software as a service with no changes to their applications at a much lower cost than just adopting public cloud, which is best suited for more, sort of new modern applications that have to be iterated at a rapid pace. So if you have systems of engagement that don't have to change, or systems of records that don't have to change much, those are best designed for that infrastructure. And then for new systems of engagement, or what I call systems of intelligent data-centric applications or interface-centric applications that have to change rapidly, we embraced Kubernetes for all cloud providers and plugged in all the controls, security, and management of it. And those businesses for us are contributing pretty highly at this point in time. We don't publicly break down the businesses, but those are our fastest growing businesses. Our recurring revenue at this point in time are nearly triple-digit growth. So it's a really, really strong growth of the businesses. That sort of was our approach to just embrace public cloud and give our customers a faster path to the cloud, because our alternative would have been try to hold back. And we thought that was not the right approach.
I think that's a great example of collaborating and figuring out the ecosystem, and Lochin is going to hit me if I don't end the collaboration. So thank you so much, Sumit. This was really inspiring. I hope all of you enjoyed having Sumit on stage with us.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.